I'm very, very happy, excited, and nervous to be here. Definitely not my first rodeo. You've seen me up here before. But this is the first time I've actually read my poetry on campus as an actual reading. And so every reading for me is different. This one's a little different because it's not only my work, so what I do off campus, but I'm doing what I do off campus on campus. So I'm just like, I don't know if they're ready for like full-fledged Icess, but let's see. And so I wasn't quite sure what poems to pull. So I'm actually going to pull poems as I see fit. I'm literally gonna let the spirit guide me, and then we're just gonna go down that road. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. All right, so that's what we'll do. All right, and I do enjoy heckling, but don't be mean. If the spirit moves you and you're like, I cannot wait for Q&A, I have a question, then let the spirit move you and ask your question, okay? All right, this first one is called Ball is Life, an ode to Black boy joy before the school bell. This is for the jump shots, the epic dunks, the alley-oops happening when most slurp morning coffee with crusty eyes. By sunrise, you have already won the championship. Twice. At the buzzer with the crowd cheering your name before the morning bell rings. This is for the free throw line at the crack in the almost middle of the crooked driveway where you have made your space, where you hold court and take cautious care before shooting your shot so that the ball doesn't hit your mom's black Ford Mustang before work. This here is for those LeBron-worthy legend makers spinning around and throwing magic in each bank shot as backpacks stuffed with last night's homework cheer from the sidelines. Let's give an ode to the joy before a joyless day, where no one can tell you nothing, where you aren't boy but young prince, where you aren't discipline problem but half-time solution, where your disruptive influence only influences how many points you score before the bus rolls up to take you to school, before first period, before having to tuck away your glory for your game face, surviving suicide drills and dodging rogue passes from the other team. A prayer for the moments before the sun comes up and that you are the brightest star for miles. We can see you through our collective eyelids. Everything is possible before. You need more air, young sir, in your jump shots under your wings to fly away from what is coming like Jordan in his day. More air in your lungs, double in reserve so that the breath never leaves you, even if they step on your neck. Thank you. So one of the things I'm going to do, probably to the chagrin of the people recording in the back, is I'm going to tell you a story of all the things I've written. Yay! So this particular poem actually took, okay, so one of the things that people ask me, and if that's on your list of things to ask me, I'm so sorry. How long does it take you to write a poem? It depends on the poem. Some poems for this collection literally took 24 hours from concept to drafting to finalizing to literally placing it on the page. Some poems like this took 2 years to write. And I remembered kind of the beginning sliver pieces of paper of this poem. I knew I wanted to write a poem about my neighbor. My neighbor they have since moved, catty corner from me. Before he became an annoying teenager, because they all become annoying teenagers, he was a sweet boy who would play basketball in the mornings. And he would be very careful to not hit the ball on the Ford Mustang. Like, he was just like, and one time he did, he was like, oh, you can hear the gas from across the street. I think he did get in trouble though. This was around the time that we had a lot of things happening in America. Philando Castile, Alton Brown, the whole thing. And so I do not have the pleasure of having children, as you will learn and find out later on in today's reading. And I imagined being a mother of a teenage or nearly teenage boy who was Black in America around this time, and the absolute fear every mother has. And I was like, I couldn't imagine, I knew his mother, and I couldn't imagine the fear that his mother had, and how the conversations were. And so I wrote this poem thinking like, you know, there's 10,000 million poems about being Black in America. There are, and they're all wonderful. And there's 10,000 million poems about the injustices in the world. Yes, they're all wonderful and they're needed. But what about the joy? What about the joy of being a boy before class starts, playing basketball because it was fun, and like everything else is kind of crappy, but like this is the fun part of your day, right? And so that's kind of where this poem came from the observation of why don't we just write about joy? And so that's where it came. So, yay, joy. So a lot of poems in this collection talk about mental health and mental illness. I myself struggle with anxiety and depression. Yay, like the 33 million other Americans who do. And so, again, I'm trying to be helpful and joyful. So I wrote an ode. And an ode is actually literally, it's just like an exaltation of something, essentially. So I wrote an ode to anxiety, and literally it's what it's called, Ode to Anxiety. You are the kind of lover I always knew I'd have but never wanted. The kind of lover my madre warned me about, all knees together and don't come home pregnant. But when my belly filled with your spawn, it wasn't enough. The terror continued. What if they looked like you? A Xerox copy of your tension, breath by shortened breath, the crawling of forearm skin, the way the brain tricks, flight or fight, and it's always fight, and it's always fight. My fist against your chest, your fingernails digging into my skin, my fist aims for your jaw, your cold fingers coil around my throat, and they squeeze. I cannot breathe. You pull me in, and again we tussle. You don't love me, I scream, face hot with resignation. You don't know how much I love you. I heard the answer, and you linger in my skin, in my breath, in my brain, like a million web browsers open. I am confused what to do next. I want you gone. You stay inside. You kiss me to show what it truly means to be breathless, to have life sucked out of you until I double over, crying, este hombre solo sabe hacerme ser sufrir. We are a novela, you and me. We are the univision of brain effery. We are the dysfunction that was always coming, the kind of couple people stop inviting to dinner parties, uncomfortable to talk to, unbearable to think about. Their good intentions cloak the bruises you've made. How I fear daylight, how I fear people, how I fear looking at my reflection to see the damage of your life, of your love in my stare. So fun things about this particular poem. So it is an extended metaphor about a dysfunctional relationship of which anxiety can be. And it feels like that sometimes. You're just like, and you just can't breathe. And you feel it like everywhere. For me, it's right here on my skin. Like I can feel it happening. Like there's a tingle that happens here. And then my palms get like clammy, and then I just can't breathe, right? That anxiety, yeah. And so writing this one this is one of those poems that happened really quickly. This is one of those poems I'm just like, I'm gonna write it in a day. And I wrote it, and then like gave it to a friend. They're like, whoa, okay, do this, this, and this. And I did it, and then it was done. Like literally, so we went from a poem that took like 2 years to write to a poem that took like 24 hours to write. And so it's interesting of that dynamic. But yeah, it's one of those things. A lot of these things in here is what I feel when I have anxiety when it comes. There's a line here that is in Spanish. And if you are taking notes and wondering when I'm going to give you the answer to a question, here it comes, baby. There is a Spanish line in here. It is in italics. Most of the Spanish in this book is not in italics. The only Spanish words that are in italics are like song lyrics. Everything else is not. And the reason why I chose that is because language is language is language, and for me, language is everything. And so it's just like, if it's Spanish, if it's Italian, if it's anything else, it's just like, why should you get special treatment? Like, that's kind of me. And so I said, no italics for any of the Spanish words unless they come from like a song or another poem, right? Just to denote that. And that's something I went back and forth with the book editor. And we came to an agreement, and she's like, yeah, no, you're right. Like, let's not italicize the Spanish words. This is you. This is how you communicate. And so Google is real. And I said, yes, thank you. So that was like an interesting choice there. I have no idea what it's like to be a certain type of person, right? I don't know what it's like to be an Italian person living in Milan who only makes just enough to like pay for food, right? But I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to be on like food stamps. By the way, government cheese is the best cheese. Fight me on that. And that American government cheese went hard back in the day. It was amazing. And the peanut butter was also great. Okay. Yeah. And so I know what it's like to be that person. And so that's what I tap into. Like, I tap into, I don't know, I'm not an Italian woman, but I've been a poor woman. I'm still a poor woman. I'm a teacher, but and a poet. But I know what it's like to be poor. And so I tap into that. The next poem is called Cookout Invite. If y'all are following along in the book, it's page 12. Cookout Invite was one of those interesting poems. This one took a couple months to get solid. There was different versions of this poem. But in case you haven't noticed, I'm Afro-Latina. I speak Spanish. My dad's from Cuba, my mom's from Guatemala. And so one of the interesting things about living in this country and being the first generation in this country is that you code switch more than you think you do. And I actually had to track it one day, and I'm just like, no wonder I'm exhausted. I'm code switching all day, and by the time I get home, all I want to do is sleep and like eat like beans and rice. That's like literally all I want to do. And so one of the code switching things I do is code switching between Afro-Latina and the experience of being Afro-Latina and the experience of African-American. I'm not African-American. I'm the first in this country. If I ever have children, they may be African-American. How about them apples, right? And so that's what's so interesting, right? And so the code switching between that is something that I'm always kind of like very cognizant of. And so I wrote a poem about it. Want to hear it? Here it goes. It's called Cookout Invite. She yelps in a fit of glee, "Girl, you invited to the cookout." I thank her for her invitation, but apologize for not accepting. I say to her, the cookout was never yours to begin with. That when meat was roasted at a party, it was on Caribbean islands, not in her backyard. That when music is blasted over speakers, it was filtered first on drum skins, beats pounded by persistent palms. That when there's a line dance, it happened before cargo hit ships, hit shore, hit colonization. That when dominoes are played by the elders, the trash talking bounced and darted off tongues that made their own ways in the world. Tucked in between spine and ribcage for safekeeping, that when we talk about religion, saints stood in for gods. Hidden in virtuous time capsules who have not forgotten that ocean means mother and lightning means father. Before there were hymns, there were chants. Before there were prayers, there were offerings. that when once we dove into a body of water, it is by choice, not because we needed to be swallowed. She looks at me, dangling questions off her earlobes. I can't make her understand that I have already been to the cookout. I have never left, but when she is ready, she is more than welcome to make herself a plate. Thank you. Okay, so when I was growing up in the East Harris County in the 80s, I always say, there was literally a couple of black families, a couple of Mexican families, not like Central American, straight up Mexican families, and a lot of white families, right? A lot of white families. And so I first in my family to go to a school and stay in school and graduate with a master's, high bar for the next ones coming after me. Sucks to be them. And so I knew when I went to school, I had something to prove. And so I was just like, who's the smartest kid in the class? I'm sitting next to them, right? And so learned, and I talked white, which there's no such thing other than like you just talk properly, I guess. So I talked white and I had all these experiences. And then when my sister went to school after me, she's 5 years younger, her experiences were completely different because at that point, things changed in East Harris County. We got more black people. We got more Hispanic people. The Central Americans moved in. There was a couple of Cubans. They stay hidden though, like they didn't come out. Like we were the Cubans. And so she would come in and she would have like, she already knew hip hop. And it took me a while to like, I knew TLC because everybody knew TLC, but she was just like, yeah, no, you need to listen to somebody called like Jay-Z. I'm like, who? Eventually I got to it, like, and so I would hear her, how she talked to her friends, and I'm like, I don't talk to my friends like that. And that's when I understood, like, my sister's experience in being black here is different than my experience being black here. And so that's when I learned, like, oh, okay. And so my sister actually helped me, like, to code switch. So if I sound black, it's because she taught me. My younger sister, don't tell her that because she'll get a big head. She thinks she hangs the moon. She does kind of sort of hang the moon, but still, I'm older. All right, I'm about to read something called a duplex. What is a duplex? I don't know. If you are filling out questions, here's the answer. A duplex is a form that was created by Jericho Brown, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, for the collection called The Tradition. By the way, if you've never read that collection, oh my God, it's so good. Jericho Brown. And he created this form called the duplex. And the duplex has a couple of things happening in it. It's got 14 lines. I'm not going to go into teacher mode, I promise. It has 14 lines, and it's a cross between a sonnet and a ghazal. Yeah, it's hard to write. I only written 2, and will never write another one again, ever. Here's one of them. Why do you speak Spanish if you're black? A duplex. My skin illuminates an off color, anger tattooed on the back of my tongue. Tattoos heat the back of my tongue like a slap. I cradle explanations with a thick blanket. Explaining is a suffocating blanket, but Texas summer lifts spirits like vapor. Vapor and summer mean playground wounds exposed. Healing doesn't mean an ending to pain. Healing doesn't mean an ending to pain, and I am too black to be brown anymore. Too black, not brown enough to make sense. My ancestors spoke in battling tongues. Inheriting battling ancestors' tongues, my skin illuminates a strange color. I know it's weird, right? It's weird. It's weird. Yeah, you see how it just kind of loops back? And it just like, It's several couplets, and the second line from the couplet, or the second line on the couplet informs the first line of the next couplet. I love this poem. I'm just going to read it, and I'll talk to you about it later. Love ghosts. They say 18% of Americans have seen a ghost, that a haunting is just a person experiencing the hereafter while still alive, while the heart still beats, while blood still circulates. There was always going to be a part of me haunted by you. Like debris after a storm, you linger, echo, in the most inconspicuous ways, in the memories created, the endless conversations, that time when we couldn't leave each other alone. Now you appear when I forget to breathe in the way I am born to breathe. This haunting is karma, lessons for the things I have denied, me. I am reminded of who I was and who I can be. These two people, they are not the same. This is a haunting of a different kind. You are a love ghost, too transparent to grasp, dead in the ways that matter. The physical matter of your love survives, as do the questions. Are conversations happening now that we have never uttered? Experiences we have shared that have yet to happen? Long walks that only belong to love songs? Phantasms, by definition, are loved in absence. How do you love an apparition held together by battle scars? The answer, you cannot love what refuses to be present. Maybe I am the one who can't let go. I am phantom enough to love my scars and the way my body tells of blissful disappointments, wonderful tribulations, happily dodged bullets. I am incorporeal enough to know my scars are a map of life. They are the vertebrae, the inside of the skull, the inside of the femur that makes a person complete, solid, firm, present. There's a heartbeat here, a haunting of the dead, what the dearly departed miss about being alive. Beautiful in a way that is difficult to forget. Let's do Letter to the Unborn Child. Warning, I have never gotten through this without crying. Let's see if I make it today, shall we? All right, so if you have the book, it's on page 38. It's one of the prose pieces. So this collection only has 2 prose pieces. And what prose means is that they're actually like narrative, like it's an actual kind of a story type of thing. And both of them are letters. So they're epistolary narratives. It's a fancy word meaning it's a letter. That's what that means. Letter to the Unborn Child. Dear unborn you, I know it kind of sucks that you'll never be born. I hope that you've gotten used to that idea. I know that it's bad and even hurtful to say, but I've already embraced that idea. The idea of not being your mother. You didn't do anything wrong, neither did I. It just wasn't meant to be. Well, that's what everyone says, so I guess that's true. But I can't help loving you anyway. Even though I'll never see your face, I could spend time discussing the hows and the whys of our situation, but does that matter? I love you and all the gray hairs and days of worry you had planned for me. Even though you'll never be born, I had names for you and your sister. Yes, there were going to be 2 of you, beautiful little girls ready to set this world of ours on fire. Your father, I don't know who that would have been. I haven't found him yet, and he hasn't found me. I'm not sure he will stick around when he finds out you 2 won't be joining us. Who wants to throw away their chance at making a family? Isadora Rosalina. That's your name, by the way. Your little sister is named Nena Carmen. You are both named after women made of steel who knew better than I the meaning of grace. Mujeres cut from cloth that is no longer made. These names are not only your legacy, but your birthright, as their blood would have run through your veins. Listen, mi niña bonita, I am not afraid of being alone. I am not afraid of many things in this world, but I am afraid of forgetting your name or forgetting to dream about you and wishing you well. I'm afraid that the world will tear you away from my soul, and that when hopes escape through the gaping hole in my chest, so will my dream of you. I will admit, I still hold a sliver of hope that we'll be together, even though I know medically that's never going to happen. I think during the darkest of nights that some wonderful woman will give birth to you and hand you over to me, that we will look at each other, me with tears in my eyes, because your mom is a llorona. She's a crybaby. And you with new twinkling eyes, and we'll just know we were made for each other, and now you are whole. But this you must know, a warning perhaps. I can barely take care of myself right now, so taking care of you would be beyond difficult. I can't keep milk from growing sour. I eat stale bread because it's a sin to throw it away. My favorite thing to eat is cold pizza because I'm too lazy to pop it in the microwave. This is who your mother is, imperfect and flawed and lazy, but I still have so much hope. Hope. That's what I want to tell you, teach you. That's gasoline for existing. You can't really breathe without hope. You hope that the next time you inhale, that air fills your little lungs. It doesn't have to be there, you know. Air. Sometimes I skip a breath and it reminds me to pray, to believe, to hope in things that don't exist in physical form. Like you, my Isadora Rosalina Fernandez. You are air. You are belief. You are hope. I guess that's why I have named children that will never come. I have willed a family that isn't mine. I have dreamt a world that makes you possible. Hope. She's a bee, but she's a necessary one. I have imagined the big moments in your life before I've imagined mine. Your first communion, the first day of school, or the first time your teacher calls me to complain about you. Oh, what a proud moment that would have been. You would have been taught to question everything, even the colors in your 64-piece crayon box, because how can you only have one flesh color, but 5 ways to say purple? You will identify that as oppressive to the flesh color, since it is not a monolith, and you will use that color to create your first picket sign. Mommy's little chingona. That's when your teacher will email me to tell me how inquisitive you are, because that's teacher speak for you talk too much in class. And darn it, Isa, I would have been equal parts proud and terrified, because what if you ask a question with an answer you don't understand, or overwhelms you, or worse, makes you cry, makes you hate, destroys your faith in people or the world or God? I've known you weren't coming since 18, old enough to know that what I knew about the world was rubbish. At first, I didn't believe it. Back then, the doctors handed out what-if scenarios more than prescriptions. I swallowed all the what-ifs and maybes and the perhaps they prescribed. After a while, the what-ifs became never-words, and sooner than what I'd like to admit, it dawned on me that you would never be there. I cried myself dry, cried myself until I was dead inside. I prayed because one time my abuela, your great-grandmother, knew of someone in her pueblo that couldn't have children and then all of a sudden had a swollen belly because she drank some hierbas and matas and everything that is holistic and trendy now that the hipsters have discovered how to package it. How many green things and teas does one have to drink to conceive a child? Answer, the world doesn't make enough green things to make a miracle. That makes you precious, mi cielito. You are too precious to be born. You are too much of a miracle to exist. This is why you are not here with me. It took a while to adjust, understand, and accept that you weren't coming. No one took it harder than your grandma. She wanted to hold you so badly that she dreamed of it for years. When it wasn't to be, there was a part of her that stopped existing. She never talks about it, says it's God's will, so she must accept it, but then grows quiet. There's nothing to say after that. Oh, my beautiful little girl, my beautiful, beautiful girl. You are my life. You are the life I will never know. The life I always wanted to be curious about. The unanswered prayer I still whisper. You are love, and I love you madly. Know this to be the complete truth, that part of my heart is always yours. If we never meet, even in dreams, even in death, know that you are my very heartbeat, the essence of what I know to be good and pure in the world. You are true, even if you don't exist. I love you, Isadora. I love Nena. Take care of each other. With all the love in the world, Mom. Ooh. Oh my God. I can't even look at you right now. That's always a hard one. It's not hard to read, but it's hard to make it through without crying. I've completely accepted that I can't have children, but at the time that I wrote this was my official goodbye to the idea that I would never have children and can't. And so I was just like, well, what is the most constructive way to say goodbye? Write a letter. And so I wrote the letter. And then, of course, the writer in me says like, oh, this is pretty good. Slap in some similes in there and this will be good. And I did. And this actually got published in a literary magazine that one of my friends was a guest editor for. And she said, we had so many people like comment on this that like you really need to consider like putting this as part of your collection. And I'm like, bet, whatever, I'll put it in there because like I needed to be like a certain number of pages. And so when I read it now, I always excuse myself with the audience and say, I don't know if I'm gonna make this without crying. So I apologize for almost crying. You're welcome, you're welcome. I have time for nothing. I have time for nothing. Do the questions. Do you guys have any questions? Oh, wait a minute. One of the answers. This is called a chapbook. This is what poets usually publish first. It is self-published. It's just a smaller collection of poetry pieces. I answered all your questions, right? Yeah?
Just one left.
Okay, give it to me.
Where does inspiration for poetry come from?
Your life.
Okay.
My life.
Wait, my inspiration for poetry comes from your life?
No, my inspiration came from my life. Your inspiration is going to come from yours. It comes from life and your experiences. Any questions, comments, concerns, ideas? Revolution. I'm here for the revolution. It was difficult. If I lived in New York or Boston or Jersey, like, I'm everywhere. Like, me, everywhere. Down the street, your neighbor, cutting your hair, the whole nine. Here was difficult. So it was a lot of, like, understanding that on New Year's Eve, we had, like, lechon and yuca and arroz con moros. And then when I would go out, like, understanding what gumbo was. Red beans and rice, soul food, what that was. And frankly, at the root of it and the apex of it, we're not that different. Look, we washing the meat before we cook it. And like, we actually wash it with like vinegar. I don't care how clean that butcher is. Nope, not happening, right? So in the pinnacle, there's some things that are similar because like the slave trade was the slave trade and like we all came from that same place, right? So that is similar. But when it comes to like social cues, like music, I was in college. I was a senior in college before I knew who Teddy Pendergrass was. Yeah, gasp. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. I did not know who he was. And then like I was in an internship in Detroit, beautiful, wonderful Detroit. And my roommate was African-American and she put on Teddy Pendergrass. I'm like, who's that? She's like, what? Saturday morning, she's cleaning the Teddy Pendergrass. Saturday morning, I'm cleaning the salsa and Mark Anthony in India. And like, you know, that's what I'm doing. So, but we both cleaning on Saturday morning though. You getting up. You are getting up. There's no sleeping in, you're adorable. That's not happening. You better be sick. So let's talk about American Dirt because I want to. Janine Cummings, I'm coming for you, girl. No, I'm not. I don't even think about you until now. But American Dirt, what made American Dirt like offensive, right? I'm sure the writing is fantastic. I'm sure the plot is just like quick pulse, like, oh my God, it's amazing. Is that she wrote from a perspective that wasn't her own and didn't base that perspective on humanity, right? She wrote a caricature of the Mexican cartels, of being in Mexico, of being kidnapped in Mexico. She wrote a caricature, is what she did. And so there's nothing wrong with writing about other cultures if you are respectful in that. And you understand like what makes you human. You start with the question, what makes you human, right? I don't know about being in a Mexican cartel. I ain't that gangster, right? But what makes you human? The fact that you grew up hungry and poor. The fact that you did not see another opportunity to rise up in this country. Is having a different type of hunger. It's having that hunger to like survive. That I understand. I don't have to agree with you, but I do have to try to understand you. And she didn't come from that perspective. So that's kind of where you start as a writer. You're like, I don't know anything about you, but what makes you human? What makes us the same? Where's the commonality there? And I'm gonna go from the commonality there because I already know it's gonna be centered on respect. Good question. I'm an emotional person. So if it doesn't feel, and I can't even explain what that feeling feels like, all right? If it doesn't feel real, I know when okay, how about this? I know when it doesn't feel real because I start to shake. Like literally here, I start going like this. Like you can't see it, but like, I'm like, ooh, that's not right. That's not right. And so I redo it. And depending on what the topic is, I'll probably go find someone who has had that experience. Like I would go find the Italian woman or go find like, well, I'm not gonna go to Italy because I don't go to Italy because, you know, bills. But I would find like their granddaughter or their sister who's here and say, hey, tell me what it was like. Or do you think I can talk to her on like WhatsApp?
I can.
You know, I strive for as much as authentic as possible. If it is not real and it's not true, it doesn't need to be in the world because there's already false things in the world.
Yeah. They're great. Thank you, Icess. Let's give her another round of applause.
Thank you.